A very good morning to one and all. I welcome you all to the webinar on Introduction to Machine Learning Mathematical Approach, organized by Department of Applied Sciences, Parul University. We are entering a new world where the technology of machine learning, speech recognition, and natural language understanding are reaching a nexus of capabilities. The end result is that we will soon have artificial intelligent assistants to help us in every aspect of our lives. Machine learning is one of the hottest topic in current. Even the Bill Gates had said that a breakthrough in machine learning will be worth 10 Microsofts. Our guest for today is Purnima Pandit ma'am, Assistant Professor Applied Mathematics Department, the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda. I welcome you ma'am on behalf of Parul University team. Dr. Purnima ma'am has more than 25 years of teaching experience in bachelor's as well as master's level. Her research area consists of soft computing, control theory, and machine learning. She has more than 25 research papers published in national and international journals. Currently, she has 3 PhD students working under her. I kindly invite ma'am for her talk on Introduction to Machine Learning by Mathematical Approach. Please, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to thank the host who had invited me for this lecture. And shall we begin then? My screen is visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. There's some disturbance in sound I'm hearing. So others okay, I would like to mute if they can.
Okay.
Yeah. Am I audible, everybody? Yeah. At least one, if they can respond.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And my screen is visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Fine. So good morning, everybody. Again, I would like to thank the host who had invited me for this lecture. So today's topic is Introduction to Machine Learning and mathematical aspect to that. I'm basically a mathematician, and we people look out the domains where we can work out. So this machine learning kind of is a topic from the computer science domain. But everything, there is a tool which we should have to look any process in any domain. So mathematics is a tool which allows us to model different aspects in different domains. So this is what I have today. So these are the buzzwords that we have heard nowadays: machine learning, data science, data mining, data analysis, and various other artificial intelligence, deep learning, neural networks, and all that. So these are the kind of words that come across our ears. So what do they mean? And for the coming years also, you will listen these words only. So as I proceed further, few of the words you will be able to clear. Whenever I have any process, whether it is in a biological process or a physiological process or any process that we come across, for which we want to have a machine learning doing our job. So what basically we want is, we want to deliver our intelligence, human intelligence, to the machines, and we want our moderation, our work to be delivered to them so that they can take the intelligent decisions, right? For that, whichever domain it is, we should be intelligent enough to collect the correct data. The data is very important. According to the problem, you should have the proper data. And once that you have, that data would be in a very raw form. Right? You may not be directly able to process the data, right? So for that, you will have to first, do the pre-processing. So that is a kind of data cleaning. And for the process that you want to model, right, what are the various inputs that are important? Right, that you should be able to identify. For example, if you are trying to do sentiment analysis, now what is that sentiment analysis? You want to see that whatever talk I had delivered, whether it was useful to the audience or not. So for that, let us say we give the feedback form. From that feedback form, you may have the questionnaire plus the remarks. Now, questionnaire, it is okay, we can grade them, we can do the statistical measure and all that. But the remarks part is also important, So in that, somebody may say, okay, it was very lengthy. Somebody may say, okay, informative. Others may they put their own, emotions into it. So we have to first, try to get these words into numbers. That it was lengthy. What do we mean by lengthy? Or what it was good? Or it was very excellent, right? So these are the sentiments of a person. So you'll have to have the numerical form of these sentiments. So the features that I want to, use for the analysis of that model is very important. It may be in the numeric form. It may not be in the numeric form. If the data is not in the numerical form, then you will have to do what? You will have to present that in the numerical form. Once the data is there, we know that this input is good enough to model the process. Then we can do the first basic thing we try to do is get some insight about the data. So some exploratory data analysis we do using statistical tools that we have. So for example, if you have data, you would like to know what is the mean or four moments: mean, mean, statistical, this thing, standard deviation or variation, then skewness, what is kurtosis. So that gives you some rough idea that how the data is, or are there outliners. So we always feel these outliners are destroying our data, so we should kick them out. But I'll give you one example here. That suppose we have a banking system and there you have a normal data coming every day, right? And suddenly one outliner occurred. So that here in this case, the outliner is a signal, is an indication that some bad is happening, some fraud is happening in this account. Okay, so outliners are not always bad. You should look out. So it is up to us that how we see the data, right? So once exploratory data analysis is done, we give that data, we get some insight of the data that allows us to judge that which kind of training or learning should be done. Okay, so that our machines will be able to capture the complete process. So there are different kinds of machine learning tools we will learn as we proceed further. And whatever they are able to, and the basic intention for the machine learning is for prediction, forecasting, or any other kind of analysis. But these two are the basic, intentions, that you need to analyze the data. You need to understand the complete process for prediction. What will happen in future? For example, we want to suppose predict the flood, or you want to predict any other thing. Like nowadays, COVID is there, so we want to see whether it will decline or still further more tight protections are to be done so that it can subside, right? So this kind of analysis gives us, more better picture of the process. So that analysis only in numbers will not be, so lucrative. Will not give us the complete scenario, complete message. So we do some visualization things using certain tools, and that gives us the better picture of the complete process. So the major steps of any data science process and data occurring in any domain so would be data collection, so raw data preparation, then doing some pre-processing, some exploratory analysis to get the insight of the data, then do the machine learning, and whatever output you have, that put in it in a better form. So this is the complete cycle of the data science process. Yeah. Let us see where the machine learning stands. So machine learning is a topic, or is a science which is coming in between the artificial intelligence and deep learning. That means it is a part of artificial intelligence. And what do we mean by artificial intelligence? It's a machines that can do the work of human. Okay, so they were the border kind of programs, which were able to intelligently mimic humans. For example, they were able to play the chess and all those games. So these were the borderline artificial intelligence thing. Even robots, not only the intelligence, but also the some kind of work that humans are doing. So these fall in the artificial intelligence thing. Then we here definitely in artificial intelligence thing there is a description of the process, right? You need to define. So decision making, systems fall here, and those rules are defined. These rules may not be precise, and therefore, still, even if they are not precise, the machine is able to take the decision. So therefore, it is kind of intelligence that machine has shown, right? Then came the time where we were not able to tell what are the rules. So then from where to get the rules? So then we tried to have the data telling us that how it has occurred. What is the process that has stimulated that data? So machine learning then is the embedded part in artificial intelligence where we don't have the rules, we don't have the algorithms, how to process and all that. What is the core of the machine learning? Just the data. From the past data, the computers will be able to learn and will be able to forecast or predict the future scenarios intelligently, right? Now here we had a data and we have to give in machine learning, we have to see what should be the input to the computers, what should be the input to the machines. Now suppose you don't know what should be the input. Okay, and there is a large domain of the inputs that can be given from which are vital that you don't know. Then comes handy the deep learning, which is a sub part of machine learning. These guys, they can capture the vital features, the vital inputs from, let us say, I'm just giving a rough just example that out of 100, right? Suppose only 50 are important features, others can be derived from this 50, then machine learning can easily capture those 50, right? So artificial intelligence coming as a border intelligence, wherein the machines were able to mimic a human mildly, even when rules were not stated. Next came the nested in artificial intelligence was machine learning models, wherein the process was captured through data. Now, which data is vital, which data is important, that also now machines are able to learn through deep learning. So this is the position of machine learning. It is a one between deep learning and artificial intelligence. So let us see what is the basic definition and how it coined up. So Tom Mitchell, he stated that how do we create a programs that can improve with the experience? Okay, so this was the question coined by Tom Mitchell in some video lectures, and then technically he defined that a computer program is said to learn from an experience E with respect to some class of task T and a performance measure P. So there is some task to be learned with some performance measure, and that should happen in such a way that the performance in the task as measured by P should go on improving. This is very technical, right? And let me give an example. A person wants to learn a swimming, right? So task is swimming. And what could be the performance measure? It's the time, let us say, time taken for 1 lap. Right? So initially when a person will start learning, the time taken will be more. And as per his experience, as per the experience of the person, for the same task, swimming task, what will happen? The performance, that means the time taken for doing 1 lap would go on decreasing. So the performance has improved, right, with the experience. That kind of thing, if a machine can do, then we will say that machine has learned. Right? So this is a technical definition of machine learning. That there is some the experience is very important. So the new data also which is coming up in the process should also be given to the machine so that it can take care of those kind of occurrence or generalization is possible. Right? So I have divided that technical definition into parts. So it is what? Study of algorithm, which improves the performance of some task with the experience. This is what is machine learning. So my audience at least should be able to capture this in mind, that what we want to study when we say we are trying to learn machine learning, right? If we want to instruct a machine, we should learn how to instruct. That is the kind of thing. So we should be able to study the algorithms which will improve the performance of the machine, right, for some task and over the period. So over the period when the machine is trained, so it gets experienced and it will be able to perform the task as per our desire very nicely. So this is the division of the definition. Right, so coming to more layman's kind of thing. So machine learning is a programming. Of course, some programming, although it happens through data, it's a kind of programming, right? To optimize the performance using example data. What do we mean by example data? So in the past, whatever kind of data has occurred for the phenomena, that is collected and it is given to the machines for training. Now, for example, then there is no need to learn to calculate payroll, right? If you want to calculate the salary of certain person, right, there is a standard, formula to calculate it, right? This many man hours he has worked, he is at this position, so this much salary would be there, right? So here it is straight away a conventional kind of programming that would require. But so where the machine learning would be required? For example, if we are trying to navigate on Mars, right? Moon, we tried to send our satellite, and partially we are successful. But now we are suppose we want to send it to Mars. There also some the research is going on. We have even sent the certain photos are there from the Mars. So all there, the learning will be very useful. For example, in speech recognition, you have already heard Google, this, the various other speech recognition, Alaska or whatever that is there, right? Even Bixby in Samsung mobiles. So all these are speech, but then still I have written speech recognition here because these speech recognition are not available in native languages, right? So there is a scope, definitely a very large scope for the research in this area. Then routing on the computer network. See, everybody nowadays, due to the situation of COVID, what has happened? Everybody is on computer and we want to access somewhere, some server or the other. So, and which are definitely, there are backups or multiple places this data is there. So the routing is to be done in the optimal way, so that in the minimum time the data is captured and sent to the user. That is one thing. Or you can talk about the GPS, right? When GPS is there, you are trying to travel over certain road, and then through GPS gives you the information that there is a congestion and some other alternative is there on the route. Then you will be trying to minimize the time or not get into that ditch of the traffic. So that kind of solutions, if we want, then machine learning is good in those cases. Or using biometrics, right? These are the different areas where machine learning is very much useful. Okay, and for example, other things which are definitely where it is already applicable are spam filtering. So mail that we receive, whether it is, you can see that certain mails, they directly go in spam, right? And they don't come into the inbox. So there is software running behind our mail servers which can categorize the mails into spam or good ones. Then credit fraud detection, digit recognition, right? Detecting faces, MRI images for detection of any disease which are image based. For example, it could be a cancer detection, or it could be the malaria thing, right? So various image analysis techniques. Then recommendation system. You might have seen that when you try to search certain song, the similar certain other songs do come up, right? Or if you try to Google something out, then and you click to the site, the similar other sites would be recommended. So in the Google this thing search engines, there are recommendation systems working on. So search engines and handwriting recognition, we want to made it directly from the written scripts. We want it to be converted to the digital form. So handwriting recognition, scene classification, whether for a person, if the person is happy or sad, or so all these things are already happening, right? Guys, so we have to still further make them intelligent. So the core of the machine learning is data, which can occur in different scenarios or different domains like statistics, economics, engineering, and other areas like signal, wherever the signal is occurring, wherever we want to have the visualization of the data. These are the various interdisciplinary fields where data is occurring and the machine learning is applicable, right? So let us come to the core of the machine learning, the data. So data is very abundant. It is always to one click that you make on your computer, on your mobile, on your laptop, that generates the data, right? So lots of abundant data is coming, and we want to analyze that data. And analyzing that data is expensive. So that knowledge we want to have, which is expensive, and still we are lacking that knowledge, right? So this we have to balance, right? We should be able to capture the process as intelligently as possible. Here I have taken an example of customer transaction. Like a person who brought this film also brought the other film, right? So that kind of pairing, data pairing is there, will allow us to make the recommendations for the other customers. So to build a model means to have a good and useful approximation, right, to the data. And let us see that what are the various forms in which the core of machine learning can occur. So you have various flavors of the data, and whichever we like is the word no. We should select the one whichever will give us the process, features of the process nicely. So this data could be numerical, categorical, or ordinal. Numerical data we already know, right? That could be a discrete one, or the continuous. Discrete in the sense of like age, right? If you are taking just the years, or how many times you did the purchase, or how many times you have flipped the coin, or how many vehicles a person has at home. So these are the discrete kind of data. And you have the other form of data, numerical, which is continuous, right? So the time taken. So normally the time we have now the unit of time in very smaller this thing also. So we can consider that to be a continuous data. Or how much rain fell on the given day, right? So these are the kinds of continuous data. Then coming to categorical data. This means that the data is falling in different category. For example, the COVID cases, right, on this date, 7/9. So there are places where the cases were less than 250, so very less number of cases, or more, and so on. So the places which are dark purple are having the highly, they are highly there are very large number of patients are there, or the cases are there. I should not say patients, but cases are there. There may be recovery rates also, but I have just taken the cases that were there on the 7th September, right? So these are the kind of data. There are, although here the category is specified in terms of numbers, but still it is category. So what is the difference? For the difference, the numerical data, we can further, do some processes to the numerical data, whereas this is just a representation, okay, where the things can fall. For the other examples of the category could be gender, or any other binary data that you liked the movie or did not like, yes or no kind of data, or race, state of residence. Am I a resident of Gujarat? Then I cannot be a resident of Maharashtra. So that kind of category, it could be binary or more than one category, right? So these are categorical data. And lastly, you have the ordinal data, wherein the numbers are ordered. So when I say rating, and if I say that 1 is the lowest rating and 5 is the maximum rating, then not only the numbers, not only the categories are there, but categories are ordered, right? So these are the ordinal kind of data. So summing them up, these are the three base standard categories: that numerical, categorical, and ordinal. Okay. And in computers, these are stored as text, numbers, clicks, graphs, tables, images, transactions, videos, and various other forms. So from these forms, we should be able to, if I want to process if I want to model some process, I should be able to put them in the numerical form so that machine learning can be done. So enough of pre-processing for the machine learning. Then once you have decided that what is the kind of data, you should be able to see that what are the kind of general machine learning processes. So those processes are associative analysis, supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. So these are the basic standard classes of the machine learning. I'll take from the supervised and unsupervised one method each. Okay. So let us go with the association learning. In this association learning, what happens is that these are more probabilistic in nature. For example, we have a market basket transactions data is there, that a person has bought bread and milk together. Other one has bread, diapers, and eggs. So these are the different items that a person buy at a time. So for what association we can get out of it? That generally, if a person buys bread, he buys milk, right? Similarly, if a person buys chips, then he may buy a Coke. And if that happens, what is the probability, right? So it will not happen always. So how many times it has this combination has occurred? So that association will do what? Will allow us that near the bread counter, we should have the milk counter. Or if one is here, so this allows the storekeeper to arrange the materials also. So if one material and the associated material is kept besides it, it would help them in selling their products. So that is where the associations are useful. Next, we go to the supervised or the unsupervised learning. What is the basic difference between supervised and unsupervised learning is that in the supervised learning, for every input, you will have an output. So supervised learning has a labeled data. Label means our associated output is there. Still, I am talking only about the data first. That this is a supervised data which will be useful for the supervised technique. Okay. So I have an input vector. Okay, first vector, let us say of a dimension d. So there are d components for the one input, and that is associated with y1, a label y1. Similarly, ith data is associated with label yi, and there are n such datas, and each of them have the corresponding output. So for a data, if I have a corresponding output, I will be using a supervised learning technique. If the corresponding outputs are not there, still the machine can be trained, and that kind of training will be called as unsupervised training or learning, right? So the basic difference, supervised and unsupervised. In supervised, the output or teacher signal or the associated yi's would be there, whereas in unsupervised it would not be there, right? So for example, depending on the length, width, and weight of each fruit, right, I have labeled, or the data is labeled as either it is banana or orange. Suppose we have data which is categorizing the inputs into bananas or oranges. Then in such data, depending on the length, width and weight, will be having this. So this is already occurring. What is the use of that? The use is that when for the unknown thing, we don't know what the label is, using the length, width and weight, we will be able to classify whether it is banana or orange. So this is the example of labeled data, which we can use in supervised training. So learning model is unlabeled in unsupervised one, and the learning thing is labeled in the supervised. That I've already stated. So let me first go with the unsupervised learning. So if the data is not having the output, then what can we capture? So we can capture what is the cluster, or what is the segmentation of this data. Depending on input, we divide the data into different segments, into different clusters. This is what is the machine model that can come up. For example, finding the clusters in population, finding clusters in fruits, species, and so on. These are the different examples. So that clustering, let us say, for example, we have two features, feature 1 and feature 2. Pictorially, 2-dimension or 3-dimension are easy to depict, to show them pictorially. So this is one such example. Look into the plot. We can say that there are two categories of data, right? But if we are having higher dimensional input instead of 2 dimensions, suppose you have higher dimension, then finding the cluster would be difficult. Finding such a clustering would be difficult. So what are the different methods? The different methods for unsupervised learning are K-means, Gaussian mixture, hierarchical clustering. This I have listed few of them. There are various techniques. Large number of methods have come up. So I'll go with one of them. So K-means I will try to make you understand, and where the mathematics is going into it, right? Here it is using very preliminary mathematics or arithmetic, but still you can see that in the computer science domain also the maths is there. So K-means clustering was proposed by Hutting and Young in 1979. The requirement is that there are n objects which are to be divided into k clusters. Now this division should be in such a way that intra-cluster similarity is high. That means within a cluster, the objects are very much related. Where intra cluster is very high, and inter cluster means from two different clusters, if you try to take the objects, the similarity is low, right? So that way this statement is very important, and this we have tried to mathematized and found a technique which can give us that within the cluster the similarity is high, and between the clusters the similarity is low. Okay, so for that we will this complete statement we can analyze in this way, that you have k number of objects. Now k number of objects which are occurring as what? The centers. Our aim was what? To divide n objects into k objects, into k groups, right? So this k, that randomly we select k centers, called as center of gravity or centroids of those clusters, and for the remaining objects we try to see that how much they are related, how much closest they are. So mathematically we will be using some metric. Okay, so metric, we know that what are the vector spaces, what are the functional spaces and all that. So vector space, definitely with some metric defined on it, is a function space, right? So that we know, and if we have some inner product, well-defined inner product over that metric, so more complicated, you can go into Banach, you can go into further spaces. So I am talking about the first preliminary thing, so let me not go into much of mathematics. So somehow we are trying to relate, see whether the objects are related or not. Then, using those relations, we try to update the centroids. Okay, that okay for these kind of objects, the center is not this one. Or I'll show you an example in which how the centroid are updated, and then behind our mind we always have some objective which is to be met. But until what we have to do this? So this process is to be done until what? So that kind of thing is called stopping criteria. So it may be number of iterations. If I have repeated the processes for n number of times, let us stop. Or if the centroid remains unchanged, or if there is no other assignment that is happening of the points. So centroids remains unchanged, or the points are not coming or going to from the clusters. It could be the stopping criteria. More, in a precise manner, it can be specified in this way that I have an object defined by this vector. So an object A has an input vector of d dimension, A1, A2, A3, AD. So I have a feature vector of d dimension, and each could be continuous, right? Then we are using some norms. It could be Manhattan norm, it could be Euclidean norm, or any other LP norm, or a cosine similarity. So here we have a metric which allows us to find the similarity or the distance computation is going on. So whether the point is nearer to the centroid, or it is far away from the centroid, or to which centroid, to which cluster it is nearer to. So to which cluster it is belonging, that will defined by the minimum distance, right? So for each point, we try to find the distance from each centroid, and the minimum distance tells us that the object belongs to that cluster. Then we want to update the cluster also. So if once the objects are put in one cluster, we try to see the mean value, because mean is what? The representative of that group. So mean, we try to see the mean, and if that mean, what we have found is same as the previous centroid, then we are through. We have obtained the center of that cluster, and this should happen for each of the groups. So once all the centroids are freezed and there is no movement of points from one cluster to the another, our convergence criteria is matched. Behind the mind, we always have the sum of the squares should be minimized. Okay, so always we have some objective which is to be optimized, right? And depending on the process of the algorithm. So here this is the error. So from the centroid, how much the distances that we want to minimize, right? I again specify here, these are the places where the mathematics can go on. Here it is only for the finite spaces. You could extend this to infinite space, okay? And you will have a theory for your research, that you are trying to have the K-means algorithm for the infinite spaces, right? So I have coined you some problem for your research. Let me give you an example so that you get more insight into the process. We have a data, two-dimensional data for 16 such data points. So there are 16 data points which is represented by the attribute 1 and 2, so pair, right? And you can see that there is no output associated with it. The plot shows this data. Figure 1 shows the data. So if you just see roughly, you would say that it is in two categories, right? This data falls in two categories. One is this, the other one is this. But still, if I want to, classify it into three groups instead of two, I have some rough idea, and I know that these are coming from three different groups. So what I do is, roughly, I start with some centroid. You can see the encircled points also with the red circles, right? So those are the initial, centroids that I have taken as an approximated ones. So the pairs are denoted by this 3.8, 9.9. So this is the centroid of the first group, centroid of the second group, and centroid of the third group. So 16 data points. From those 16, 3 of them are taken as centroids. center of gravity of those groups. And then here, for my example, I have taken the L2 norm, Euclidean distance. So just under root of xi minus xj whole square, right? Some of those. And that is L2 norm I've used for the distance. You can use the Manhattan one, just taking the absolute of each component of the attributes and then summing them up, right? So for each point, we are trying to see that what are the distances from C1, C2, C3, calling them D1, D2, D3, right? And then we will try to see the minimum of that. So the next table gives us this calculation. I have 16 attributes. From these, for the first point, let us say, for the center one, so 6.8 minus 3.8 square plus 12.6 minus 9.9 square, and that sum you take and square root of that gives me what? 4.0. The simple distance formula we are using for x1, x2, y1, y2. So x1 minus y1 square plus x2 minus y2 square, and that we have taken square root of, giving us 4.0. Similarly, we find D2 with respect to centroid C2, and we find D3 with respect to centroid C3. So for the point P1, we have found three distances with respect to centroid C1, C2, C3. From these three, we see that D1, D2 is minimum. So therefore, the point P1, the first data belongs to the cluster 2. Okay, belongs to the cluster 2. Similar calculation we do for all the 16 pairs and finding the distances, and it gives that these are the clusters in which our data point falls. So first one is in 2, many of them are in 1, then they are in 3 also, and so on. So once this is obtained, let us see how many are there in 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 data points are there in cluster 2. So for these 4 data points, we take the average. And that would be the new centroid. That allows us to find the new centroid. Okay? So this is how, and this process is to be repeated until the center is not changing. So this is the first iteration. When you take the average, you see, so the average, the centroid may not be from the data. Okay, may not be from the data. Initially, this black circle were the data, were the centroid, and the new updated centroids are shown by the red dot. We can see that each of them are something new, right? They are not occurring from those 16 data points. Now using this centroids, again we do the same process. We find the distances D1, D2, D3. We see that for that the point belong to which cluster, right? And go on repeating until, so this is the next repetition, next iteration, and the next one. And here you can see that there is no change, right? Therefore, the process has kind of freezed, right? Has kind of freezed. So here we will stop our process of iteration. So we may get in less number of iterations, it may be more. The stopping criteria could be whatever you want, that number of iterations or the freezing of the centroid. For example, you can see here in the previous one, the point, this point, right, which is in C2 at the border of C1. This shifts to, in the next iteration, it shifts to the cluster C1. So either the point shifting is stopped, or the centroid, the coordinates have not now changed, or the number of iterations have reached maximum. Any of this could lead to the stopping of our algorithm. And this is how the supervised learning, machine learning is using mathematics. Which kind of mathematics? Simple distance, simple metric, right? So we can define our new metric and then define the new mean clustering algorithm. Next, I go to the supervised learning. As I have already stated, the supervised learning will require the label, will require the associated output. That output could be just the binary thing, plus or minus one. For example, approve credit, yes or no from the past history, or the mail is palm or ham, or the fruit I have supposed to do collection of two fruits when this is banana or orange. That kind of binary classification may go, and the classification could be linear, could be non-linear, or could be a non-linearity of higher dimension, right? Here it is a simple group, but here you can see that a double loop kind of thing is formed of two categories or multiple categories, right? So these kind of classification problems can go in the supervised learning. Or you can have a problem of regression. That means you have in the input output data. So you have a feature, and depending on that feature, you have some output Y. So input output data is there, and you want to predict that what will happen after this range, right? So look into the data. You are seeing initially we would try to approximate it with a straight line. Then you can see that parabola is more fitting. Still, there are certain data points which are out of that. So you may try to fit the higher dimensional, curve to it. So this we were able to do using regression things, right? But for the less amount of data, regression is okay. But if you have a huge data, then this don't become handy, and there the machine learning is very much useful. And this red curve that I've shown is this. It's a kind of overfitting. This curve is passing through each curve, each data point. We don't want this kind of thing. Yeah. So volatility. Okay, let me say the variance is very much right in this the curve. So you may be, interested in finding what is the share price. So if this is the kind of behavior, the volatility is more. I'm coming to the other domain. But the supervised learning could be for the classification or the regression. Let us take a very simple example. But before that, what are the methods that can be useful? So support vector machine, neural network. This also, these fellows can also do unsupervised learning also, and reinforcement learning. Or you could have the decision trees. These are more probabilistic in nature, decision trees or k nearest neighbor and so on. There are different techniques for supervised learning depending on whatever number of features you have. So let me take one such technique, neural network I have used for the supervised learning. These fellows, neural networks are the biologically inspired thing. Means what? So they are inspired by our brain, okay, how our brain works. And the processor in our brains are what? The neurons in our brain. So similar to that, in artificial neural network also, the processing units are called node or neuron, right? They are the basic units. And let me just fastly tell you how the human brain is working. So this is the neuron. It is attached to the other neuron through the this dendrites, some roots like thing. So then with the other neuron, this is what is the connection between two neurons. The roots of one neuron is attached to the nuclei of the other neuron, and so on. And the in between path is called the axion. Okay. And so how the complete process is there, that the humans get input from the sensory organs. Okay. That input, for example, a mosquito has a bite, right? There is a mosquito bite or on your hand. Then you may not be viewing it. So what is the sensory organ? Your skin. So skin, some irritation happens to the skin. So skin sends the message. The message is processed, and you suddenly look to that, the place where the mosquito has given you a bite. So that is one thing. Or you may be looking at the place and there mosquito is sitting, right? So there the input is what? Your eyes are the sensory organs which are giving input, and you will not wait for that mosquito to bite, and you will give the reaction to it. You will try to drive that away. So that are the kinds of processing that human can do. We want a machine to do not that much complex, but some preliminary or other advanced kind of intelligence shown by the machines. So this I've already told. As equivalent to that, artificial neural network have nodes and the connections. So these connections are called weights, right? So what is the strength of the connection? Strength of the connection determines that how much the component of the input influence the output node. And you will see that the intelligence in the neural network is lying in the weights. So once weights are updated to the point that there is no change in weight, that time you say that the machine has learned, the neural network has learned, and now it will be able to mimic as per the human intelligence, right? Or any other required intelligence that you have. So weights are very important, right? Okay. So basically, neural networks, knowledge or intelligence lies in weight, and acquiring knowledge means updating those weights. And there are techniques for updating those weights such that there is no change in the weight. So learning thing is there, teaching thing is there. When you even have the output, labeled output associated with the input, we are trying to teach it. Or if the labeled thing is not there, it is trying to learn by itself, right? So that neural network, as I already mentioned, could be supervised learning, unsupervised, or reinforced, right? This was the beginning of the neural network.
Sorry to interrupt you, ma'am.
Yeah.
You have 10 minutes left, ma'am.
Yeah.
You can continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Right. So the beginning happened with the one such neurons wherein the inputs were given with the weights. Initially, we were not knowing that how these weights were to be trained and so that, but using different weight values and this threshold value, the simple looking neuron could act as a Boolean function like basic Boolean functions like and, or, and not. Then they further those thresholds that I showed you that we included in the input only to the neuron. So along with the various other input features, we even had a bias, and where the connection from the bias was also was also the component in the training. So these and weights were to be trained in such a way such that this desired input, the inputs give the desired output. Now the output is not always binary or so, or simple output is not there. So we subject them to some kind of activation functions. So this weighted input goes to the activated function, and this is how you get the desired output, right? And this is one such neuron. It was also known as perceptron. And this perceptron could, mimic various functions, but it has its own limitation. It was able to mimic the inputs which were linearly separable. So not only one such neuron, which is shown in the other way, not only one such neurons, we can have I'll just show, we can have the collection of such neurons, okay, called as single layer feed forward, okay. Fine. So there are different learning rules for this neuron, and one such rule is called perceptron learning rule. In that, whatever desired output is there, that is used. So let us take an example. You have inputs, you have associated outputs. Randomly, you take the first weight set. Okay. So we know how to have the uniformly distributed random numbers or any other distribution you can take, or you can have the weights of your choice, and these are subjected, the updates in this weights will happen in this way, that weight 2 will be weight 1 plus delta wi. And what will be delta wi? It will be the difference between di, desired output, minus signum of weighted input into input, and the C is a very good parameter. It is called as learning rate. If that parameter is very small, the network will be able to learn very slowly. but it will not miss any, any optimum point, that means minimum or maximum point. And if the learning rate is very high, you may miss that. So here it should be very cleverly chosen. And once that is chosen, the weight, change in weight can be done. So for example, the signum means if the net input is positive, then you give the output 1. If this net input is negative, you give the input minus 1. You give the output minus 1. So that is what is the signum function. So for example, this is the first weight, and you try to multiply with it, take the dot product with x1. So what is that? 1 into 1, 1, minus 2 into minus 1, minus 3, and so on. This will be minus 0.5. So minus 3 is there, right? Minus 3 is there. So that because it is negative, you will take the minus as an output, right? And that will be the output multiplied by the input vector and added, multiplied with the learning rate. This will be giving you some weight updates. So W2 you can see is given in this vector form. And similarly, you go on, giving X2, X3, and so on, so that the weights get updated. Once your data, set is exhausted, you can again give it, right? So you give this data set for the other epoch, and for n times of epoch, you can say, and there a time will come that these weights will not change. So that is how the neural network would have learned. So these are the different other activation functions that can be there. Signum, I told you, the one which we took was bipolar, minus 1 and 1. It could be unipolar also. The output is discrete 0, 1. Or you could have any other continuous functions from 0 to 1 or minus 1 to 1. Right? These are different activation functions. As I told you, the limitation of this network is that it can only mimic the linearly separable functions. Linearly separable. So let me go fastly to, these are the different algorithms for training. You can, refer any standard book on neural networks for going through this list. Here, this is what I mean by linearly separable. For example, suppose you have the OR function. So OR function we know is 0, 0 only for 0. Only for the false thing, it is only false. Other times it is true. Let us say I show the false by this hollow square, and these blacks are the true values. So I can draw many such lines which can, divide this into two classes. So this is called linearly separable. Lines, I am talking about the linear thing, not the curves. Whereas if I take the XOR, you will not be able to draw a line to, discriminate these points. So therefore, you came up with multi-layer feed-forward kind of networks. So these are the multi-layer. What is the addition to it? That instead of just the input and output layers, you even have the hidden layers. And Cybenko had a paper in which he said that one hidden layer is enough if a function is continuous function on the compact domain. So even one hidden layer would suffice. It is not that you should have multiple hidden layers. So I don't think we have enough time, but I would like to tell you here that here is what the mathematics goes on, that you have a weight updation which is taking in calculation the derivatives, okay, and using this for the multi-layered, you had the updation for the output layer as well as the hidden layer in this form. So this was a very famous back propagation algorithm derived using our calculus methods, right? And using those calculus methods, you had a way of updating the weights in the last layer, that is the output layer, as well as the hidden layer, and that made the neural network smart enough to depict any function. I will show you one MATLAB program that I have this is a MATLAB program. You have one hidden layer, I'm just showing the simulator output. So initially, this is the curve I want my network to learn. Initially, without training, this is what the green dots are shown. And after training, within 50 iterations, after training, you can see that the machine output and the required output are overlapping. So that means the machine has learned even the non-linear function, sine, right? So similar to the sine function, which is a known function, we can have any other input-output data paired ones to be given to the machine, which can be learned by it, right? So this is a kind of supervised learning. These are our research, articles wherein we had used the artificial neural network or machine learning. For example, in speech recognition, we had even inverse, some problem in textile processing. I have used even page, right? And that I just want to give you the initial kick if you want in your research for the topic that is coming up in now the scenario. So any questions if you have? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Yeah. So any question from any audience?
Any questions from the participants are warmly invited. I don't think that
Okay.
still there are any questions.
Okay.
So I would like to thank Dr. Punima ma'am. Thank you so much on behalf of the whole team for this knowledgeable session on machine learning. I would also like to extend my thanks to all the participants who have given their time to this and the whole organizing team to arranging such kind of session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye. Thank you. Good day.
Good day, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Have a nice day, ma'am.
Bye.